If you want to put yourself in the conversation with these top kids, you have to be doing everything that they're doing and then a little bit more, because they're not going to stop. They're going to keep pushing it and they're going to keep getting better. So you have to be doing more than they're doing to kind of close the gap between you and them. Only a very small percentage of kids are going to get to that point. We don't see all the kids that burned out, or the kids that quit, or the kids that got hurt and just never. We see that top 1% and they get recognized. We don't see the 1,000 other kids who put in that same time and work and just never panned out for whatever reason it is. It's easy to get lost in, just watching it on social media and seeing these top end kids and kind of forget everything that happens behind the scenes to get them there. We got some kids going to journeyman. We got some kids at Super 32, and I'm kind of encouraging them, outside of those two things, let's kind of scale it back right now. We competed all summer. We got a ton of matches in, let's focus on being in the room and getting better at things. And we'll see how the results look at the big tournaments, and then we'll adjust come season time. Wrestling does great things for everybody. It's not just for the top end kids. We want to make sure that everyone has a positive experience. But if you are a kid who goes to a public school and wants to be successful, I think you should take pride in the fact you're representing your town. You get to go out there and compete on a team with kids that you grew up with, kids that you have wrestled with since you were younger. That's the type of thing that I try to sell them. It's very rare that you could reach the highest levels of this sport if you're not a great person, if you're not someone who, is a hard worker, who is accountable, who, respects other people. It's very rare that you can make it to the top of this.
And welcome back to Wrestling Mindset. Today we're here with Roy Dragon. Roy, thank you for joining us, head coach of Ridge High School.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Man, we go back a long way. I remember when you wrestled for Woodbridge Rec, and you were in fifth grade. Fourth or fifth grade, and you beat my friend who is in seventh grade at the time. And that kid was a savage.
A long time ago now. Feels like forever ago, but yeah, it started out over there in Woodbridge up until like fourth grade, and then moved over to Bridgewater after that. But yeah, we were right next to each other for a little while.
That was like 1997.
Yeah.
And you were just a little guy running around, and my friend was like, savage beast, that kid. I remember him saying, I never told you about that.
No, that's it was I don't know if I was ever a little guy, but maybe compared to the older kids I always had to wrestle, I must have I looked like a short chubby kid.
Well, that's right. You were wrestling in seventh grade and you were in like fourth grade.
Yeah, when you weigh more than everybody else, there's not a lot of options at that point. So
oh man, good stuff. All right, so how's the school year kicking off?
Everything's good. Yeah, everything's good. We're getting back into the swing of things. Teaching wise is always a adjustment. I teach little kids, kindergarten to fifth grade, so that's an adjustment. But as far as wrestling goes, it's sort of just business as usual. Getting back into different, some different times and things like that. A little bit of adjustment and schoolwork, obviously, for the kids, but business as usual. Getting ready for the season.
Awesome. I was thinking about how New Jersey wrestling has grown and developed over the years. Obviously, Jersey was always tough, even from when we were kids. But I mean, you're a guy who's been around the sport, forever. From when you were real young. Your dad is a longtime referee, New Jersey, ref many of my matches. So shout out to him. And so talk about some of the, what you've seen, what you've noticed over the years in New Jersey wrestling.
Well, I think the most obvious one is that the high end talent has gotten so much better than when I was in high school. You see kids. We just watched World Championships. You're looking at high schoolers competing on. What do we have? 2 on the team? I know Duke and Forrest. I mean, the level of wrestling at the high end has gotten so much better. So much more technical, so much more year-round full-time training, strength training, things of that nature. So that's one change. And then, as a public school coach, and someone who's been involved in, the public school wrestling side, the gaps widen. The gaps between, the top end and the middle tier has widened, and that's just the nature of how good some of these high school wrestlers have gotten and how much they've separated themselves from the pack. That's the inevitable, outcome of this, which, and listen, it's paying dividends for, Team USA and for us on the national stage. And, you see these kids coming into college ready to compete at a high level, freshman year. And it's a testament to the type of work they're putting in and how much the talent's improved.
Oh yeah. And then also I think the explosion of information out there, right? Like now kids, when we were younger, people weren't doing mindset training, nutrition. Maybe some were doing some strength training. There were like that was kind of the beginning of clubs, like maybe a few years before us where clubs started really kicking in. But now there's just an explosion of information and tools for these wrestlers, flow wrestling, YouTube, and having access to these college guys, right? That they haven't had in the past.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot more opportunities to train with high level coaches and wrestlers. There's definitely a lot more opportunities to compete, year round on a high level from early ages. And you could tell that, just the way that you go and watch just the average, not even, you go to the New Jersey State tournament and you watch some of these kids wrestle and see how good the competition is and how many kids out there are, nationally high level wrestlers. It's a grind. It's if you want to put yourself in the conversation with these top kids, you have to be doing everything that they're doing and then a little bit more, because they're not going to stop. They're going to keep pushing it and they're going to keep getting better. So you have to be doing more than they're doing to kind of close the gap between you and them. And it's great to watch these kids compete at a high level, and it's definitely changed the sport a little bit, I think.
From now until Fargo, our partners, Champion Athlete Wrestler Nutrition, the premier weight management program for wrestlers, will be offering a special Fargo nutrition program for only $350. That's $160 saving. Visit their website, champion-athletes.com, or call 800-324-1447 today. Oh, without a doubt. Now, talk a little bit about the mindset and the difference that maybe some of the struggles that I guess remain the same mentally for kids as from we were coming up. And then also some of the new things they might be facing in terms of social media. Like now you're seeing what everyone's posting about you. Because you see the words there, what everyone and their mother is thinking of you, which is different than how we grew up.
Yeah, it's definitely, you live in a world where, it could be good or bad, right? And for most people, it's both. When you're doing well and you're performing well, you get a lot of praise. When you're not, or you make a decision or do something that other people don't agree with, you hear all about that. I think the other thing it kind of does is, you sort of just see the results of a lot of these kids. You watch, some of these high school kids and you see them competing against, beaten NCAA champions while they're 16, 17 years old. You see a lot of the results and kids. I think a lot of what's lost is like the behind the scenes and how the kids have gotten there and, how they've separated themselves from everybody else, over the course of their career. And then, the other side of it, I think there's two sides of it is, only a very small percentage of kids are going to get to that point. We don't see all the kids that burned out or the kids that quit or the kids that got hurt and just never, we see that top 1% and they get recognized. We don't see the 1,000 other kids who put in that same time and work and just never panned out for whatever reason it is. So, it's easy to get lost in, just watching it on social media and seeing these top end kids and kind of forget everything that happens behind the scenes, to get them there.
Oh yeah. I mean, you see the guys like Bo Bassett and they're posting videos and they're doing like we didn't even have really much of a concept of that when we were younger, of who are the very best people in the country that are even among the best in the world right there. It was like almost your immediate, like your county, the county next to you, maybe some of the people in the state. And that was pretty much it, right?
Yeah, I mean, you'd hear about Colat and you read the stories about it. He was a little bit before me, but this high school kid that's competing at open tournaments, and every once in a while you get a kid who would go and perform at Midlands or something and have a decent performance. But for the most part, it was just I was watching when I was younger, just watching like Damian Hahn, like watching him wrestle, and that was who I considered the best. There obviously he was very, very good, but
I still think of him as the best, like you. But just the way he was, how dominant he was in my head, it's like that was the best wrestler ever.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of times I watched that high crotch and like studied how he did it. I mean, it was just so smooth. But you weren't, I couldn't go online and watch, every once in a while I get videos of like international wrestling, or even at like club, like they take out videos of like taped videos of the world championships, and like VHS of the Olympics. And then it was a big deal when the Olympics would, you get it televised and you get to watch a little bit of live wrestling. Now I think I've watched live wrestling every day for whether it's my kids competing, at a tournament, or, wherever, all over the summer, and then every college match, and every, you didn't really have access to that type of stuff. And it's, I think it's great. I think that's one thing I really encourage my kids to do is watch these guys, go out, and it's available to you 24/7 now with the internet. You can see what the best guys are doing. And I think the other great thing is most of them have videos of them training, and, them just talking after the interviews, after the matches. I as much as I watched Damien Hunt, I don't know if I ever heard him talk until he was a coach. I met him in person once or twice, obviously, but as far as like, the people we used to watch, you never heard them talk about how they trained or what they did, or interviews after matches and what they were thinking out there and how they prepared for it. You just kind of got to watch the video of what happened, and that was it. So I encourage my kids to, watch all that, look at how they warm up, listen to how they talk about how they train, how they mentally prepare for the matches. All that stuff is available to these kids nowadays.
Such an advantage. And I think you're probably one of the people who maybe had that maybe other people didn't. Your dad, again, back to him reffing for so long. You were probably going to watch the state tournament there since you were young. You're probably around it more than maybe other people.
Yeah, I mean, I used to travel with him all over. I got to watch a lot of state tournaments from when I was younger. I remember a lot of big high school matches. Peaburg versus Paulsboro in the pit, 1-2 in the state. Things of that nature, and get to go to a lot of really cool environments. High Point, Long Branch up there, like just really big matches, late '90s, early 2000s, before I got into high school, that you got to kind of experience it. And I think what what you get from that, not that it's missing nowadays, is it used to just be like, I think it was a little bit more tight knit community back then. Not that wrestling still isn't, especially when you get to the high level, but it was kind of like everybody knew everybody. It was, it was one of those things. Now, with the club culture that goes on, and the bouncing around, and the 10,000 tournament teams, I think I personally knew pretty much everybody who placed in the States, 80% of them when I wrestled. It's not really the same now. Obviously, it's a little bit different, but back then, I think, that's just how I grew up, where you were just, there was like 4 clubs in New Jersey. You went to one of the 4, and
yeah, you were plugged in.
Yeah. Every big tournament you went to in the off season, all the top kids were there. Now there's so many where they're not necessarily going to every single event. You kind of have to pick and choose your spots, especially if you're one of those top guys where you could wrestle in a major tournament every weekend if you want to. It's just not the right plan for most kids is to compete at that level every weekend. So no, a little bit different. Not that it's better or worse, but it was definitely fun growing up around those people, and making so many friends, and having those relationships.
Mindset Monday is brought to you by our official sponsors, Eat Clean, bro. Make sure you order today, get them delivered right to your house, check them out, and make sure you put in your discount code MINDSET. Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, and now it's just more common, I think, that for people to travel, like going out of state, like not just the tournament. Every now and then, the people would still compete in Pennsylvania, New York, but now people are traveling all over, flying. That really was not common at all back then. And yeah, like you said, all the duels that are taking place, rather than some summer duels that happened in certain places.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in high school, I think before high school, we travel a little bit. We do like tournament champions in Ohio. We go down to there was some Team New Jersey stuff. But then once you're in high school, you had the national duels. Then you had the freestyle duels, and you had Fargo, and that was that was kind of your big traveling off season stuff. And then obviously, I think the only other one was we did, NHCA nationals, would go right after the season ended. But now, I mean, even the kids I coach, I have a different kid in a different tournament around the country pretty much every weekend. There's a lot of opportunities now, and it's kind of it's great because they're available, but it's also about finding the spots that are appropriate for each kid, and them finding the level of competition that's appropriate for them, and the amount of competition. That's one thing I talk to my kids about is, we got some kids going to journeyman, we got some kids at Super 32, and I'm kind of encouraging them, outside of those two things, let's kind of scale it back right now. We competed all summer, we got a ton of matches in. Let's focus on being in the room and getting better at things, and we'll see how the results look at the big tournaments, and then we'll adjust come season time. We'll fix some things and get ready for the season. So it's definitely tougher on kids deciding where and when to wrestle nowadays than it has been in the past, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then talk about, I guess, also the mindset being at a public school. Now there's just so many people going to private schools or Catholic schools. Talk about that mindset and like that, maybe even any mental hurdles you see a lot of the wrestlers they need to overcome in terms of, hey, I could compete with anyone wherever I'm competing, wherever I'm practicing, going to school.
Yeah, and listen, I mean, there's, I obviously know that each person has their own, has a choice to make about their education and their school, and what I try to tell the kids is I think when you go to a public school, your mindset has got to be that, I think there's some great things, obviously, as far as your training in the room and opportunities, there's a lot of things that private schools offer that we can't at a public school. It's just not feasible. We have, whatever amount of kids come out for the team, whether that's 30, 40, 50 each year. Some of them have never wrestled before. Some of them are, year one, year two. You have just that, and you try to find the right way to work with the entire population that comes out, because I'm a firm believer that wrestling does great things for everybody. It's not just for the top end kids. We want to make sure that everyone has a positive experience. But if you are a kid who goes to a public school and wants to be successful, I think you should take pride in the fact you're representing your town. You get to go out there and compete on a team with kids that you grew up with, kids that you have wrestled with since you were younger. That's the type of thing that I try to sell them. I try to sell them on you're representing your team, your town, your school, and you get to do it with your friends. You get to do it with your friends. And when you're successful here, you have a whole town and a whole program and a whole community, group of people that you've built over the course of your wrestling career, and they're all supporting you. And obviously, not to say that private school kids don't have a great community and support, but I tell you, it's special. I think that people acknowledge that there's just a little bit different feel when you have a kid who's came all the way up through your program since kindergarten. He goes out and puts on the singlet with your town's name on it and wins the state championship. It's special to a lot of people, and then that's what we're working towards. We give kids an opportunity. And it's our job as coaches to try to close the gap on the amount of opportunities. Some things I'll never be able to do. We'll never have a $2 million wrestling room. We'll never have, be able to go to 4 national tournaments during the season or anything like that. But, we make sure that we get out of the state and find some good competition. We make sure that we provide them with as many training opportunities as we can throughout the year. And, like I said, it's a little, the big difference, I think, is that when you have 20 kids who are all top end wrestlers, you kind of follow the same script for all of them. Everybody can compete at this level and train at this level. Where at a public school, you kind of have to cater to all different levels of not only wrestling ability, but, the amount of effort and work they want to put in, what they're looking to get out of the sport. That everybody's looking to get something different out of it when you're at a public school. And they're not just looking to win a state championship, which tends to be, the goal of most of these kids who go to the high end private programs, which I respect. And, obviously it's working.
Yeah. But like you said, how do you, a lot of the wrestlers that wind up going on to be the most successful, and if you're looking just purely based on, financial, socioeconomic, a lot of times it's not the guys who's necessarily the best wrestlers, but they wrestled before, it had a massive impact on their life, and they went on and they translated that to career. And of course, same thing with their family. I don't think there's any wrestler who's a father or husband that isn't looking back at their career and I got the Gable poster right here. Then you think once you've wrestled, everything in life is easy. It's like that's right. I could do this as a father. I could do this as a husband. That has such an impact on people, and we can't forget about those people in the sport. That's a massive. That's one of the great things about our sport.
Yeah, and I think that any coach, all the coaches that I look up to and that I've learned from, they do things in a certain order, and it's kind of what my dad had taught me. So little that the first focus always got to be about creating great people.
Right.
It's very rare that you could reach the highest levels of this sport if you're not a great person, if you're not someone who is a hard worker, who understand, who is accountable, who respects other people. It's very rare that you can make it to the top of this sport. And then the second thing I think that we preach is being a great student. If you can't hold yourself accountable in the classroom, and you can't show up and put great effort forward in all other aspects of your life, it's very rare that you're going to do that for wrestling. The highest level wrestlers that I've seen are people who are very disciplined in all aspects of their life, who are able to achieve, not always be the best at everything else. They're not always the greatest student. Maybe they're not always get the best grades, but they work hard at everything they do, and they strive to be the best in all those other aspects of their life. And that translates, those habits that you create and build off the mat, then start to translate to your wrestling.
Absolutely. No, it's just huge. It's such a great sport for that. So many life lessons from it. The good and the bad, right? The not only the successes, but probably maybe even especially the it's really not failure, because if you're learning the lesson, it's really not a failure.
Yeah, and I always tell parents, I think wrestling is not only the toughest sport for the wrestler, I think it's the toughest for parents too. I mean, it's to watch your son or daughter out there on their own in a combat sport where there's no pointing fingers or hiding. It's tough on parents too. And as much as we talking about getting new wrestlers and new parents, that's what we tell the new parents. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough on your kid, and it's going to be tough on you, to watch them go out there and fail, to watch them go out there and not be successful at something, especially something that's so physically and mentally tough, and just not achieve success for, maybe if you start wrestling in eighth grade, maybe never, you might never go through it. But if they stick it out and they get through it, they'll get more out of it than a kid who's just naturally gifted and is just not putting in any effort. If they commit themselves and they dedicate themselves, they'll get more out of it than a kid who's just naturally talented and doesn't do those things.
The time is now to take your mindset to the next level with Wrestling Mindset. Make sure you go to our website, wrestlingmindset.com, and sign up for your free trial session today. Don't wait any longer. You want the mental edge right now. When you sign up for the free trial session, you're also going to get a copy of our free ebook, Building the Predator Mindset. This book has helped thousands of people build confidence, relax under pressure, get motivated, and build mental toughness in wrestling, school, and life. Absolutely, because then you could even have a guy who's reaching a very high level with wrestling, but it's just so unidimensional where it's like they just achieve in wrestling and they miss the big picture. I mean, that's not true for all wrestlers, but you don't want to make that mistake where you're massive success on the mat. I know world championships going on now, world champion, but then if off the mat you're not doing the right things, family life, your career, what are we doing here? Like, what was the sport supposed to be about to begin with?
Yeah, and obviously things are a little bit different the last few years with NIL, but historically for the previous 100 years, you're probably not going to support your family off of wrestling.
Right.
There's not even the opportunity for it. You could become a coach, you could, wrestle on the world team, run some camps and stuff. But typically, you're not supporting your family on wrestling. But if, you're a hard worker, you show up on time, you know how to communicate with people, that sort of stuff is all that translates. And it's always the same, I think, hearing it from adults. And I think that's the opportunity we kind of have as coaches, is to kind of connect with them on a little, on a more personal level. Like, hey, I've been through this. I've been there. I've done this. I can tell you that, odds are when you leave here in 10 years, most people won't remember if you won or lost your last match or what your record was. They're going to remember if you were a good person. They're going to remember if you treated everybody well, and they're going to remember, they're going to remember what kind of person you were around here. Obviously, if you win a state championship, that's great. But, it's kind of like the joke where, if you play seventh in the state 10 years later, you could bump that to fifth. And by the time you're 60, you just missed, you're a point away from winning it all. It's just kind of the way it goes. But people tend to, lead the conversation with, oh, that was a great kid. I really, I loved having him in class. I loved working with him in the room. He was a really good friend to my son. That's the type of thing that people typically talk about when I talk with them about other wrestlers, is, what type of person they were.
Absolutely. And we always say using wrestling as a vehicle to build better people, build virtue and mental skills for their whole life. Absolutely. Same stuff. Great. Awesome, Roy. What do you have exciting coming up for the season? Anything you want to share? And then also any social media pages. How can people follow Ridge Wrestling?
Yeah, we're at Ridge HS Wrestling on Instagram. We won the group championship 2 years ago. It was a great year for us. On paper, I thought we were coming back last year as a better team. I think on paper we were a better team, and then just a lot of injuries at the wrong time. We had trouble staying healthy. A few things happened and it never came together. So we're excited to kind of come back this year and kind of reestablish ourselves and see if we can't, make a little bit of a run again this year, put some people on the podium down at AC. We have a great group of kids, a great group of seniors this year that, were part of that championship team back in, when they were sophomores. And I think they felt the difference from, sophomore year to last year. I think they felt the difference, and I think they're hungry to kind of, get back there again. So we're excited for it. Obviously, as a coaching staff, we're going to take a look at how we prepared the kids as well and what was different in our training and what we did maybe differently last year than other years to see if we can't help them as well. But, to achieve stuff like that in the sport takes a little bit of a lot of hard work, but a little bit of luck and a little bit of timing, that plays in. The thing we like to say, hey, we could just get yourself so good that you separate yourself that much. But, as a team, as a public school team, it doesn't always work like that. We have our kids that are good wrestlers, and we have to find a way to have them peaking at the right time and performing well at the right time of the season. So that's our goal this year, and I think we have a great group of kids that are gonna have a great season this year.
Awesome, great stuff, Roy. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me on. Thank you for everything, and we love your stuff, and we'll continue to work with you guys. We appreciate it.
Absolutely, thanks. Oh, we have to give a shout out to our sponsors, Eat Clean, bro. I just had a nice beef burrito before we jumped on this call. And it was awesome. My delivery came in today. So shout out to them. Thanks, Roy. And tell your family we said hello. We go back a ways.
So yeah, same to you. Tell everybody I said hi.
Will do. Take care.
Have a good one.